the little BlackBerry store that still holds on while RIM slides. We got Will Connors in Toronto joining us now. He's been doing a bit of research in Detroit. Will, thank you very much for joining us. Tell us about this lonely BlackBerry store.
Well, it opened about 5 years ago, and it the beginning of what RIM and sure.
It was the beginning of what RIM wanted to be its retail strategy, but it didn't really pan out. There were supposed to be 100 stores around the U.S. and Canada, but it ended up being the only one.
The only one, and we have a picture of that in the paper today, and it's just sitting there, very lonely in Farmington Hills, Michigan, basically on its own there, with only a trickle of customers coming out, as opposed to the storm of customers coming in and out of an Apple store, right?
That's right, yeah. It's operated by a Midwestern retailer called Wireless Giant, and they had grand plans for hitching their cart to RIM's and BlackBerry's success. But when BlackBerry started to struggle, so did this retail outlet.
An extra forlorn-looking picture there. They got some semi-melted snow there. You couldn't have found a more gruesome-looking picture.
That is pretty gruesome. So why does this store manage to hang on, Will? I mean, this is pretty interesting. I mean, it's clear that BlackBerry's having a hard time, but being an exclusive BlackBerry store, you'd think they'd want to like unhitch themselves and maybe get some, get some iPhones and some Android phones in there and start selling up stuff that sells.
Yeah, I mean, they aren't doing, blockbuster sales, but they do have a steady stream of loyal customers who go in for repairs and to buy accessories. I was there for the better part of a Friday, and I didn't see anybody buy any phones, but a lot of people bought like hip holsters, or were coming in asking questions about their cracked screens and things like that. So I guess they get enough business through those kinds of sales to keep it alive.
As we always need to point out when we talk about BlackBerry, I'm here once a week, we always talk about BlackBerry's demise or slow motion.
It's still there, though. It's still going.
There are tens of millions of BlackBerry users. There are people still using the product. You could actually run a store, maybe even profitably, selling them stuff and selling services.
But it's not a way to get rich, though, is it?
No.
This is not a way to get rich. What was the mood of the employees in the store, Will? I mean, are the employees upbeat? Is it a nice place to hang out? Tell us about it. I mean, Peter's right. The picture looks forlorn.
Well, I mean, there's only 2 employees to begin with, and usually only one guy is there. He's a young salesman. The manager is kind of out on sales calls and doing other things. I'm not really sure. She was never really around or answering her phone. So it's just one guy. He's very friendly, but I was there for stretches of 30 and 45 minutes, and no one was coming in.
So how many people in total do you estimate came in during the day?
Probably a dozen.
So 12 people. So one every couple of hours for the entire day. That's got to be if you're doing retail, that's got to be mind-numbingly boring. Do you ever get the sense that these guys are going to go out of their minds running this store?
I don't know. The guy the lone salesman had a pretty positive outlook. He was pretty friendly and optimistic throughout the day. So he must have a good state of mind to be working there. And it's tough too, because they're surrounded by about 8 other retail outlets that also sell BlackBerries and other phones. So even in Farmington Hills, there's lots of competition.
It's probably not a stressful job.
It's probably not a stressful job. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Will Connors of the Wall Street Journal.